So a couple of weeks ago, I did a video talking about how the domestic first week hauls for Superman and Man of Steel were almost identical. And people got mad because fanboys, I guess. Now I'm going to do a video about how the first week global hauls for Superman and Fantastic Four First Steps are almost identical. And I'm sure some people are going to get mad because fanboys, I guess.
Hoes mad, hoes mad, hoes mad, hoes mad.
Moral of the story being, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And fanboys are just always going to be mad, I guess. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
So critic Scott Mendelson does a weekly box office report in article form. And he talked about how numbers for Superman and Fantastic Four in their first week are almost identical. So much so that he actually wrote virtually the same headline for both.
Something very familiar about all this.
Bottom line being, the results for both films are inconclusive if we're looking purely at their first week results. Now, under normal circumstances, for normal movies, a $217 million or $218 million opening weekend would be considered a bona fide success. But now, it's kind of looked at as nothing more than a solid start in the comic book movie genre. And I think a big reason for that is that we've seen movies like this blow box office records away not too long ago. And when that was happening, these overinflated budgets were not as detrimental to these films' success as they are now, simply because the entire genre has now come crashing back down to earth.
My, how the tables have turned.
Listen, I liked Fantastic Four First Steps, much to many people's dismay. But the truth is that they are still doing the typical Marvel thing and reporting a $200 million budget in the media. But we all know by now that the budget is actually much higher than that. If you actually think that this movie made back its entire budget and then some in 1 week, then you haven't been paying attention. But that is exactly what Marvel and apparently DC now want you to think. But if you actually stop and think for yourself, the truth about these box office numbers actually becomes pretty clear. The truth, ladies and gentlemen, is just like I've said for almost every single one of these movies that came out this year, this movie is going to need to have legs in order to be considered a success. Now, the Access Media is going to tell you that Disney Marvel and Warner Brothers DC could not be happier with this summer's box office results so far.
I don't believe you.
But just the fact that there's so much conversation, so much controversy, and frankly so much uncertainty around where these movies need to land at the end of their run in order to be considered a success, that you have to see that times have changed. These things are not the slam dunk financially that they once were.
It's true.
We all understand that the comic book movie genre peaked financially some time ago. And it feels like we've been on somewhat of a downward slope since then, or at the very least on a plateau when it comes to general public interest. Somebody tried their best to throw a jab at me by saying in my Fantastic Four review comments section that this movie was going to flop. Why that would be an insult to me, I will never understand, because I do not see a cent of that profit, and I do not have any of my personal money invested in this movie. And little do they know, normal people do not equate quality with box office because there is no connection. And also, I've been on record many times saying that I'm not entirely sure the Fantastic Four is the cash cow that Marvel hopes it would be. The quality of the movie doesn't matter if there's limited interest in the subject matter to begin with.
He's out of line, but he's right.
And to me, that is an uphill battle that Fantastic Four First Steps was always going to have to fight. Plus, we have the overall perception of Marvel as a brand to consider as well. Rome was most certainly not built in a day, but rebuilding it is damn near impossible. Especially when it is a self-induced collapse, exactly like what happened in the MCU. There were literal articles being written about this movie prior to its release that was making everyone cringe, myself included. Articles talking about how the material is going to be modernized. A dirty word if you are someone who knows better. There was talk of Sue Storm being the new leader of the group. There was talk of Johnny not being the womanizer that we come to know and love. Hell, there was even talk that a romantic relationship was insinuated in the movie between Reed and Ben, and guess what? None of this happened.
If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
But the truth is that all of this talk probably did not do the film any kind of favors. Do you know how many people told me that they hear what I'm saying in my review, but they have absolutely no interest in giving this movie a chance? Which is a shame, because I personally do think that it is one of the best things that the MCU has produced in almost a decade. But at the same time, I cannot blame anyone who has been burnt so many times that they just have no interest in giving this company their money any longer. And I think this is something that Marvel Studios and Disney needs to consider if this film does in fact end up underperforming. Sure, it's a solid start, but we need to see a lot more before we could consider that this movie is a success financially.
Y'all be cool. Nah.